There is a voice inside your head that has been speaking for so many years, you no longer notice it controlling you. It speaks when you wake up in the morning. It speaks when you look in the mirror. It speaks after every mistake, every rejection, every awkward moment, every night you cannot sleep. A voice constantly whispering, "You are behind. You are not enough. Something bad is going to happen." And slowly, without even realizing it, you started building your entire life around that voice. You began doubting yourself because of it, fearing the future because of it, overthinking every situation because of it, destroying your own peace because of it. The strange part is, most people never question the voice because it sounds like them. It uses their memories, their fears, their emotions, their pain, so they assume, this must be who I am. But Buddhism teaches something deeply shocking. The voice inside your head is not your true self. It is years of conditioning, old wounds repeating themselves, fear trying to protect itself, mental noise pretending to be your identity, and the more unconsciously you obey it, the more power it gains over your life. That is why even peaceful moments feel heavy sometimes. Even when nothing is wrong, your mind keeps creating suffering. It keeps replaying the past, predicting disasters, comparing your life, searching for problems, refusing to let you rest. Most people spend their entire lives trapped inside this invisible prison, never realizing the door was never locked. Tonight, I want you to sit with me quietly for a little while. No pressure, no forcing, no pretending to be perfect, just honesty. Because once you finally see the voice clearly, once you realize you are not the thoughts controlling your mind, something extraordinary begins happening inside you. The fear softens, the noise weakens, the constant inner struggle starts breaking apart. And for the first time in a very long time, you begin hearing something deeper beneath the chaos. A silence that was always there, a calmness the mind could never destroy, a version of you that existed long before fear ever learned how to speak. The voice quietly controls your life because you mistook it for your real self. One of the greatest illusions of the human mind is believing that every thought inside your head belongs to who you truly are. Most people never question the voice in their mind because it has been there for so long. It speaks from the moment you wake up in the morning until the moment you fall asleep at night. It comments on everything. It comments on your appearance, your future, your fears, your relationships, your mistakes, your value, and your place in the world. And because this voice never fully stops, you slowly begin treating it like your identity. From childhood, the voice quietly started shaping the way you see yourself. Maybe someone judged you once, and the voice memorized that pain. Maybe you were rejected, embarrassed, ignored, or compared to others, and the mind turned those moments into beliefs about who you are. Over time, the voice became stronger. It started speaking automatically. Before trying something new, it whispers, "You will probably fail." When someone becomes distant, it says, "You are not important enough." When life becomes difficult, it says, "You are weak." When you make a mistake, it says, "You ruin everything." And after hearing these thoughts for years, most people stop seeing them as thoughts. They begin seeing them as truth. This is how the mind quietly gains control over a human life. Not through violence, not through force, but through repetition. Because the mind knows that if a thought repeats long enough, eventually you will stop questioning it. You will simply accept it as reality. But if you slow down and observe carefully, something very strange becomes visible. The voice changes constantly. Some mornings it tells you that you are capable and hopeful. Other days it convinces you that nothing will ever improve. Sometimes it fills you with confidence. Sometimes it fills you with fear. Sometimes it makes you excited about life. Other times it makes life feel empty and meaningless. If this voice were truly your deepest self, why would it change so dramatically depending on mood, stress, fear, or circumstances? Why does it sound powerful one moment and broken the next? Why does it completely change after one compliment or one painful experience? Buddhism teaches that thoughts are temporary mental events. They are not solid truths. They are movements of the mind passing through awareness like clouds moving across the sky. But most people never learn to observe thoughts quietly. Instead, they immediately become emotionally attached to them. The moment sadness appears in the mind, they say, "I am a sad person." The moment anxiety appears, they say, "I am anxious." The moment insecurity appears, they say, "I am not enough." The thought enters the mind for a few seconds, and suddenly it becomes identity. This is why so many people feel trapped inside their own heads. They are not only experiencing painful thoughts, they are building an entire sense of self around those thoughts. And after many years, they no longer know the difference between their awareness and the voice speaking inside it. But awareness itself is completely different from the voice. Awareness notices thoughts. Awareness sees fear appear and disappear. Awareness hears the mental noise. Awareness watches emotions rise and fall. And this realization changes everything, because the listener is not the same as the voice being heard. Right now, as you listen to these words, there is a silent part of you quietly observing all of this. That silent presence existed before today's thoughts appeared, and it will still exist after they disappear. Thoughts come and go constantly, but awareness remains, still, silent, present, untouched. This is why Buddhism places so much importance on observing the mind instead of blindly obeying it. The moment you begin watching thoughts without immediately believing them, the spell slowly starts breaking. For the first time, you begin noticing how automatic the voice really is. You notice how quickly it creates fear, how quickly it judges, how quickly it compares your life to others, how quickly it predicts failure before anything has even happened. And slowly a distance begins forming between you and the mental noise. This distance is important because suffering becomes deepest when there is no space between your awareness and your thoughts. When every thought feels personal, every fear feels real, and every emotion feels permanent, life becomes exhausting. But the moment awareness creates space, everything begins changing. A fearful thought can appear without controlling your entire day. An insecure thought can appear without destroying your self-worth. A painful memory can appear without becoming your identity. This does not mean the voice disappears forever. It means you stop worshipping every thought as absolute truth. You stop kneeling before every emotion that enters the mind. You begin understanding that the voice inside your head is often only a collection of old conditioning, fears, memories, survival habits, and emotional wounds repeating themselves automatically. And once you truly see this, something inside you starts becoming quieter, not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because you are no longer completely hypnotized by the mind. For the first time in a long time, you begin experiencing moments where the voice loses its grip on you. Moments where you simply sit, breathe, observe, and exist, without needing to obey every thought that appears. And in those quiet moments, something deeper begins revealing itself beneath the noise. A calmness that was always there, a stillness the mind could never destroy, a silent awareness that has been waiting patiently underneath years of overthinking, fear, and emotional exhaustion. And perhaps the most beautiful realization of all is this: you were never truly the voice. You were always the one listening. The voice grows loudest whenever fear and uncertainty enter your life. The mind has a deep fear of uncertainty. It wants to know what will happen next. It wants guarantees. It wants control. It wants reassurance that nothing painful is coming. But life has never promised certainty to anyone. No matter how intelligent, prepared, spiritual, or successful someone becomes, life will always contain unknown moments. Relationships change, people leave, plans fail, health shifts, circumstances suddenly turn in unexpected directions, and this is exactly where the voice inside the mind becomes strongest. The moment life feels uncertain, the voice immediately begins trying to protect you. But the strange thing is, the mind often tries to protect you by making you afraid. It believes fear creates safety, so the moment uncertainty appears, the voice starts speaking rapidly. What if everything goes wrong? What if they stop loving you? What if you fail? What if you embarrass yourself? What if your future falls apart? What if you never become happy? And slowly, without realizing it, your attention leaves the present moment completely. Your body may still be sitting in one room, but mentally, you are already suffering inside futures that do not even exist yet. This is how the mind quietly steals peace from people every day. Not because something terrible is happening right now, but because the voice keeps forcing the nervous system to live inside imagined danger. Buddhism teaches that much of human suffering is not caused by reality itself. It is caused by attachment to mental fear about reality. The mind constantly tries to predict pain before it arrives because it believes anticipation creates protection, but most of the time, anticipation only creates exhaustion. Think about how many nights people lose sleep over situations that never actually happen. Think about how many relationships are damaged by fears created entirely inside the mind. Think about how many beautiful moments get destroyed because the person cannot stop mentally preparing for disaster. This is why overthinking feels so heavy. The mind is trying to control life through thought, but life cannot be fully controlled. And deep down, the voice knows this. That is why it becomes louder during uncertainty, because uncertainty reminds the mind that it is not truly in control, and the mind hates feeling powerless. So it reacts by creating more thoughts, more planning, more fear, more mental noise, more imaginary conversations, more worst-case scenarios. The voice keeps saying, if you think enough, maybe you can prevent pain. But endless thinking has never created real peace. If overthinking could create peace, the people who think the most would feel the calmest. But usually the opposite happens. The more the mind obsesses over controlling the future, the more anxious and emotionally exhausted the person becomes, because the nervous system was never designed to carry endless imaginary futures at once, and eventually the body begins breaking under the weight of constant mental fear. The chest feels tight, the breathing becomes shallow, sleep becomes restless, the heart feels heavy even when nothing is wrong. Many people live like this every day, always waiting for the next problem, always preparing for something painful, always mentally defending themselves against life, and after years of living this way, they no longer know how to relax fully. Even peaceful moments begin feeling uncomfortable because the mind has become addicted to tension. Buddhism teaches something deeply healing here. Peace does not come from controlling life perfectly. Peace comes from no longer demanding certainty from life. There is a huge difference. Most people think peace will finally arrive once they solve every future problem in advance. But the future never stops changing. There will always be another uncertainty, another unknown, another fear, another situation beyond control. So if your peace depends on certainty, peace will always remain temporary. True calmness begins the moment you stop trying to mentally dominate every outcome. The moment you accept that life itself is unpredictable, something inside the body softens. You stop fighting reality so aggressively. You stop demanding guarantees from the future. You stop trying to force life into perfect safety. And strangely, this surrender does not make you weaker. It makes you lighter, because the mind no longer has to carry the impossible burden of controlling everything. For the first time, you begin allowing life to move naturally, instead of trying to mentally imprison every possibility. And this is where the voice slowly begins losing power. Because fear survives through constant attention. The more attention you feed uncertainty, the louder the voice becomes. But when your awareness gently returns to this moment, the spell weakens. You begin noticing something important. Right now, in this exact moment, you are breathing, you are alive, you are here, not inside tomorrow, not inside imagined disasters, not inside endless mental stories. Here, and in this moment, life becomes simpler again. The mind may still try to pull you into fear sometimes. It may still create frightening possibilities, but now you begin seeing the voice differently. You no longer treat every fearful thought like prophecy. You understand that the mind is often just reacting to uncertainty the only way it knows how, through fear, through control, through endless thinking. And instead of obeying every anxious thought automatically, you begin sitting beside the fear with awareness, calmly, gently, without becoming consumed by it. This is where inner freedom slowly begins, not when uncertainty disappears from life, but when uncertainty no longer controls your inner world. Because life has always been uncertain, but peace becomes possible the moment you stop asking uncertainty to disappear before allowing yourself to breathe. The voice repeats old wounds until the pain starts feeling like your identity. One painful moment can shape the voice inside your mind for years. Sometimes it begins with something small, a rejection, a betrayal, a harsh sentence someone spoke carelessly, a moment you felt abandoned, a failure that embarrassed you deeply, a heartbreak you never fully recovered from. The event itself may have lasted only a few minutes, but the mind continued carrying it long after it ended. This is what most people do not realize. Pain does not always disappear when the experience is over. Sometimes the experience ends, but the voice keeps repeating it inside your head for years, again, and eventually, the wound no longer feels like a memory. It starts feeling like your identity. This is how emotional suffering quietly becomes part of the personality. Someone gets rejected once, and the voice says, "You are not lovable." Someone gets betrayed, and the voice says, "You can never trust anyone again." Someone fails publicly, and the voice whispers, "You will never be enough." Someone grows up feeling unseen, and the voice keeps repeating, "No one truly cares about you." Over time, these thoughts stop sounding like emotional reactions. They begin sounding like truth. And this is where the deepest suffering begins. Because the mind is not only remembering pain anymore, it is rebuilding an entire identity around the pain. Buddhism teaches that the mind becomes attached not only to pleasure, but also to suffering, especially familiar suffering. The voice repeats old wounds because the mind believes staying attached to pain creates protection. It thinks, if I remember the hurt constantly, maybe I can stop it from happening again. So the mind keeps replaying old emotional experiences. It replays conversations, failures, embarrassments, moments of abandonment, moments of shame, and each time the memory repeats, the emotional wound becomes stronger inside the nervous system. This is why some people carry sadness that feels older than the present moment. Their pain is no longer only about today. It is connected to years of accumulated emotional memory repeating inside the mind. And eventually, they stop saying, "I experienced pain." Instead, they begin saying, "This is who I am." That sentence changes everything. Because once pain becomes identity, the mind starts shaping life around it. A person who believes they are unworthy begins pushing love away before it can hurt them. A person who believes they will fail stops trying before opportunities even begin. A person who believes people always leave becomes anxious every time someone gets emotionally close. And slowly, without realizing it, the past begins controlling the future, not because life itself is repeating exactly, but because the wounded mind keeps recreating the same emotional patterns. This is why many people feel trapped inside cycles they cannot escape. Different situations, different faces, different places, but the same emotional suffering repeating underneath it all. The same fear, the same insecurity, the same loneliness, the same inner voice, because the wound was never fully understood. It was only buried beneath distraction, overthinking, emotional avoidance, or temporary pleasure. But buried pain does not disappear. It waits. And when life becomes quiet, the voice brings it back again. This is why certain moments trigger emotions far deeper than the situation itself. Someone ignores your message, and suddenly the pain feels enormous. Someone changes their tone slightly, and anxiety immediately appears. Someone criticizes you once, and the mind collapses into self-hatred. The present moment activates old emotional wounds hiding underneath the surface. And because most people never learned how to observe their pain consciously, they immediately believe the voice again. The mind says, "You are unwanted, you are broken, you always ruin things, you will never heal." And after hearing these thoughts repeatedly for years, people become exhausted, not only physically, but spiritually, because carrying old emotional pain every single day slowly drains the life out of the heart. Buddhism teaches something deeply important here. You are not required to build your identity around your wounds. Pain may have happened, but pain is not your deepest self. The voice wants you to believe your suffering defines you forever because the mind survives through identification. The moment you completely identify with the wound, the mind gains power over your entire inner world. But healing begins the moment awareness quietly enters the pain, not to fight it, not to suppress it, not to hate yourself for feeling it, but simply to see it clearly, to finally notice, this voice inside me is repeating old suffering. This fear may not belong to the present moment. This insecurity may be connected to an old wound I never fully healed. That awareness alone begins weakening the spell, because unconscious pain controls you most powerfully when it remains unseen. The moment you observe the wound gently, the mind starts losing its grip. For the first time, you stop becoming the pain completely. You begin witnessing it, and that small distance changes everything. A painful thought may still appear, but now you recognize it as a wounded voice instead of absolute truth. You stop worshipping every emotion the mind creates. You stop allowing old suffering to completely define your worth. And slowly, something inside you softens. The heart begins breathing again. The nervous system begins relaxing again. The heavy identity built around pain starts cracking open, and underneath years of emotional noise, you begin discovering something beautiful. The wounded part of you was never your entire self. It was only a hurting part asking for awareness, understanding, and compassion. Not punishment, not shame, not endless mental warfare, just awareness, just presence, just gentle understanding. Because healing does not begin when the mind finally becomes perfect. Healing begins the moment you stop calling your wounds your identity. And perhaps one of the most freeing realizations in life is understanding this. The pain may have visited you, but it was never meant to become your name. The voice gains the most power the moment life finally becomes silent. Most people believe they want peace, but when silence finally arrives, they become uncomfortable almost immediately, because silence does something very few people are prepared for. Silence exposes the mind. During the day, distractions keep the inner voice hidden beneath noise and activity. People stay busy constantly. Phones are always in their hands. Music fills every quiet moment. Notifications pull attention in every direction. Conversations, entertainment, scrolling, work, stress, and endless stimulation keep the mind occupied from morning until night. And because attention is constantly distracted, most people never truly notice what is happening inside them. But the moment life becomes quiet, everything changes. The moment the room falls silent, the moment the phone is put away, the moment there is nothing left to distract the mind, the inner voice suddenly becomes louder, very loud. Thoughts begin rushing forward. Old memories return. Regrets appear. Anxiety starts speaking. Loneliness rises to the surface. Unhealed emotions begin moving inside the chest. And for many people, this feels overwhelming. Not because silence itself is painful, but because silence removes the distractions that were temporarily covering the pain. This is why so many people are secretly afraid of being alone. Not because they dislike solitude, but because they are afraid of meeting the voice inside their own mind without distraction protecting them. The mind has become so dependent on stimulation that stillness now feels unfamiliar. For some people, silence almost feels dangerous. The moment everything becomes quiet, the voice immediately starts searching for problems. It says, "You are falling behind. You wasted your life. You are alone. Something bad is coming. You should be doing more. You are not enough." And suddenly, even peaceful moments become mentally exhausting. A person can sit in a calm room at night while their mind creates chaos internally. This is one of the deepest forms of suffering, because the problem is no longer outside. The noise is now living inside the mind itself. Buddhism teaches something very important here. Silence is not the enemy. Silence is the mirror. When life becomes quiet, you finally begin hearing the mind clearly for the first time. you begin noticing how restless it truly is. You begin seeing how constantly it judges, compares, fears, predicts, and searches for something to worry about. Most people spend years running from this realization. That is why they constantly need noise, constant scrolling, constant entertainment, constant conversation, constant distraction, not because these things always bring happiness, but because they temporarily help them avoid the discomfort of facing themselves. But no distraction can permanently silence the mind. Eventually, every person reaches moments where life becomes quiet again. Late at night, early in the morning, after heartbreak, after loss, after failure, after emotional exhaustion, and in those moments, the voice returns. This is why some people feel emotionally overwhelmed the moment they are finally alone. All the emotions they avoided during busy moments suddenly rise to the surface at once. The mind begins replaying everything, every mistake, every embarrassment, every fear, every regret, every unresolved wound. And because most people never learned how to sit with these thoughts consciously, they immediately become consumed by them. The voice starts speaking, and they automatically believe every word. But Buddhism teaches that silence is not punishment. Silence is an opportunity to wake up. Because when the noise fades, you finally begin seeing the machinery of the mind itself. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. You realize how addicted the mind is to stimulation. You realize how difficult it feels to simply sit still for a few minutes without reaching for distraction. You realize how constantly the mind searches for something to fear or fix, and for the first time, you begin understanding why peace has felt so far away. Not because peace never existed, but because the mind never stopped moving long enough to notice it. The truth is, the voice gains power when awareness is unconscious. The more automatically you obey every thought, the stronger the mental noise becomes. But the moment you begin observing the mind quietly inside silence, something slowly changes. At first, the thoughts still come rapidly. The mind keeps talking. It keeps replaying stories, imagining problems, creating fear. But if you remain present without running away, the storm slowly loses energy. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually, you begin noticing spaces between thoughts. Small moments of stillness begin appearing, moments where the mind becomes quieter naturally. And inside those moments, something beautiful reveals itself. You begin discovering that awareness itself is already peaceful beneath the noise. Thoughts may continue moving like clouds, but awareness remains like the sky behind them. The clouds come and go. Some are dark, some are heavy, some are frightening, but the sky itself remains untouched. This realization changes your relationship with silence completely. Silence stops feeling like emptiness. Silence becomes healing. You stop needing constant distraction to escape yourself. You begin sitting with your own presence peacefully. You begin breathing more deeply again. You begin feeling life more clearly again. Simple things become meaningful again. The sound of rain, the stillness of night, the feeling of wind, the quietness of early morning, moments that once felt uncomfortable, now begin feeling sacred. Because the mind is no longer completely dominating your attention, and slowly something inside you starts returning home. Not the noisy mind, not the fearful voice, but the deeper awareness beneath it all, the calm presence that existed before the overthinking, before the fear, before the emotional exhaustion, before the endless mental noise. And perhaps this is why silence feels so powerful. Because when everything becomes quiet, you finally get the chance to meet yourself beyond the voice in your head. The more you fight the voice inside your mind, the more control it gains over you. One of the strangest truths about the human mind is this: the harder you fight certain thoughts, the stronger they often become. Most people spend their entire lives trying to force their minds into silence. They believe peace will come once they finally destroy every negative thought, remove every fear, and completely control every emotion inside themselves. So they begin fighting internally every single day. They fight anxiety, They fight sadness. They fight fear. They fight insecurity. They fight painful memories. They fight overthinking. The mind says, you should not feel this. You need to stop thinking like this. You must become stronger. You cannot be weak. You need to control yourself better. And slowly, life becomes an exhausting inner war, a war nobody else can fully see. Outside, the person may appear calm, but internally, they are constantly battling themselves. Every thought becomes an enemy. Every emotion becomes a problem. Every moment of sadness becomes something to suppress. And after years of fighting the mind, many people become completely exhausted, not because life defeated them, but because they never stopped fighting themselves. Buddhism teaches something deeply different from this endless inner struggle. It teaches that suffering grows stronger through resistance, because whatever the mind constantly resists, it keeps feeding attention to. And attention is energy. Think about this carefully. The moment you desperately try not to think about something, what happens? The mind becomes even more obsessed with it. The more you say, I cannot feel anxious, the more anxiety grows. The more you say, I must stop overthinking, the louder the mind becomes. The more you fear sadness, the heavier sadness starts feeling. This happens because resistance creates tension inside awareness. The mind becomes trapped in a loop. A painful thought appears, and instead of simply noticing it, the person immediately reacts with fear. I should not be thinking this. Then the mind becomes more alert, more tense, more emotionally reactive, and because the thought received strong emotional attention, it returns again with even more intensity. This is why fighting the mind often strengthens the very suffering you are trying to escape. The voice survives through emotional reaction. The more disturbed you become by thoughts, the more power those thoughts gain over your nervous system. Buddhism does not teach violent control of the mind. It teaches observation, awareness, non-attachment. This changes everything. Imagine sitting beside a river. Leaves are floating across the surface of the water. Some leaves are beautiful. Some are dark. Some are damaged. Some move slowly. Some move rapidly. Thoughts are exactly the same. They appear. They move through awareness, then they disappear. But most people do not sit beside the river peacefully. They jump into the water every single time a painful thought appears. The moment fear enters the mind, they become fear. The moment anger appears, they become anger. The moment insecurity appears, they collapse into self-doubt. And because they react to every thought automatically, the voice gains complete control over their emotional state. A single thought can ruin an entire day. One memory can destroy their peace for hours. One imagined future can create panic inside the body, even when nothing dangerous is happening. This is the prison of unconscious thinking. The mind speaks, and the person obeys instantly. But freedom begins the moment awareness enters between the thought and the reaction. That small space changes everything. For the first time you begin realizing, a thought is appearing inside me, but I do not need to become it. This is one of the most powerful shifts a human being can experience, because once awareness becomes stronger than reaction, the voice slowly starts losing its control. The thoughts may still appear, fear may still visit, painful memories may still return sometimes, but now there is space around them. Awareness no longer collapses into every mental movement automatically. You begin observing the voice instead of becoming possessed by it. And strangely, this gentle observation weakens the mind far more deeply than force ever could. Because the voice depends on unconscious emotional attachment. It survives when you believe every thought completely. But when thoughts are simply observed without panic, they begin losing energy naturally, like a fire slowly fading when no more fuel is added. This does not mean the mind becomes perfectly silent overnight. Some days the voice will still feel loud. Some days fear will still appear strongly. Some days the old emotional patterns will return. But now your relationship with the mind begins changing. Instead of attacking yourself internally, you start becoming curious about the mind. You begin noticing how quickly thoughts appear on their own, how randomly emotions move, how temporary most mental states actually are. You start realizing This thought is not permanent. This feeling will pass. This fear is not my identity. And slowly the nervous system begins calming down. The body stops living in constant inner conflict. Breathing becomes softer. The chest feels lighter. Moments of silence begin appearing naturally. This is why Buddhism teaches compassion toward the mind instead of hatred toward it. The mind is not evil. It is conditioned. It learned fear. It learned survival. It learned emotional protection. It learned overthinking. The voice inside your head is often just a frightened part of the mind, trying desperately to protect you from pain. But constant fear cannot create peace, and endless control cannot create freedom. True freedom begins when the war inside starts ending, when awareness no longer reacts violently to every thought, when emotions are allowed to rise and fall naturally, when the voice inside the head stops being treated like an absolute authority, and eventually, something beautiful begins happening. The thoughts continue moving, but they no longer control your entire existence. Fear can appear without owning you. Sadness can appear without defining you. Anxiety can appear without becoming your identity. The voice still speaks sometimes, but now there is something deeper than the voice. A calm awareness, quietly watching it all. And that awareness is where peace begins. The voice begins fading the moment your attention fully returns to the present. The mind survives by pulling your attention away from this moment. It constantly drags you into yesterday or pushes you into tomorrow. One moment it forces you to replay old mistakes. The next moment it makes you fear future problems that have not even happened yet. And because of this, most people are almost never fully present in their own lives. Their bodies exist here, but their minds are somewhere else entirely. Lost inside memories, lost inside worries, lost inside imaginary conversations, lost inside fears about the future. This is why so many people feel emotionally exhausted even during quiet moments. The mind never truly rests. It keeps moving constantly, thinking, predicting, analyzing, comparing, regretting, preparing for danger. And over time, people become so trapped inside mental time that they stop experiencing life directly. They stop noticing simple things, the warmth of sunlight, the feeling of breathing calmly, the sound of rain at night, the silence of early morning, the peace hidden inside ordinary moments. The mind becomes so loud that reality itself starts disappearing behind thought. Buddhism teaches something deeply important here. The present moment is the only place where real life actually exists. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, only here. But the voice inside the mind constantly resists the present, because the present moment feels too simple for the restless mind. The mind wants stimulation, problems, drama, fear, control. It believes constant thinking creates safety and importance. But endless thinking slowly disconnects people from life itself. Think about how many moments people lose because their mind was somewhere else. Someone is sitting beside the ocean, but mentally replaying an argument from 3 days ago. Someone is eating dinner with family, but internally worrying about the future. Someone receives love, but cannot fully feel it because the voice keeps whispering fear. This is one of the saddest forms of suffering. Life keeps happening, but the mind is too distracted to experience it. And because attention remains trapped inside thought, the voice continues controlling the emotional state completely. The mind becomes the center of existence. Every thought feels urgent. Every fear feels real. Every emotion feels permanent. But something beautiful begins happening. The moment awareness gently returns to the present, the voice starts weakening naturally, not because you forced silence, not because you fought your thoughts, but because awareness finally stopped feeding the endless mental noise. Look carefully at your own experience. Right now, in this exact moment, what problem truly exists? Not tomorrow's problem, not last year's pain. Right now, in this breath, in this second, in this moment of awareness, most suffering begins disappearing when attention fully enters the present, because the present moment is usually far less painful than the stories created by the mind. The body may be safe, while the mind is imagining disaster. The room may be peaceful, while the voice creates fear internally. This is why presence feels so healing. It reconnects you to reality instead of mental projection, and slowly, the nervous system begins calming down. Breathing becomes deeper. The chest softens. The body no longer feels trapped inside constant psychological pressure. You begin noticing life again, really noticing it, not rushing past it mentally, not analyzing every moment endlessly, just experiencing it directly. The sound of birds in the distance, the movement of air against your skin, the silence between thoughts, the feeling of your feet touching the ground while walking. Simple things begin feeling alive again, almost sacred. This is what Buddhism points toward so often, not escaping life, but fully arriving inside it. Because peace was never hiding somewhere far away. Peace was hidden underneath mental noise. But the modern world trains people to abandon the present constantly. Everything pulls attention outward. More stimulation, more distraction, more scrolling, more comparison, more information, more noise. And because attention never rests, the mind never rests either. The voice keeps growing stronger because awareness keeps feeding it continuously. But when you begin practicing presence, even gently, the spell slowly weakens. You begin catching the mind wandering into fear. And instead of following it automatically, you return softly to the present, to breathing, to listening, to feeling, to simply existing without needing to mentally control everything. This does not mean thoughts disappear forever. The voice may still speak. Fear may still appear sometimes. Old memories may still visit the mind. But now there is something deeper than the thoughts. Presence, awareness, stillness, and slowly the voice stops feeling like the center of your existence. It becomes just another passing movement inside awareness, a cloud moving through the sky, temporary, not permanent, not absolute truth. And over time, something remarkable begins happening. You stop feeling trapped inside your own head. Life starts becoming real again. Food tastes richer. Music feels deeper. Conversations feel more alive. Nature feels calming again. Moments stop rushing past unnoticed. And for the first time in a long time, you begin understanding what true peace actually feels like. Not excitement, not distraction, not temporary pleasure, but quiet presence, a calmness that does not depend on controlling the future, a stillness that exists beneath mental noise, a way of living where awareness is finally stronger than the voice inside the mind. And perhaps this is why the present moment feels so powerful. Because when attention fully returns to now, the mind loses its ability to completely imprison you inside fear, memory, and endless thought. For the first time, you are no longer living only inside your head. You are finally living your actual life. Self-compassion silences the inner tyrant more deeply than harshness ever could. Many people spend their entire lives speaking to themselves in ways they would never speak to another human being. The voice inside the mind becomes cruel, cold, punishing. Every mistake becomes proof of failure. Every weakness becomes something to hate. Every emotional struggle becomes a reason to feel ashamed. The voice says, "You are not strong enough. You are falling behind. You ruin everything. You should be better by now. You are weak for feeling this." And after hearing this kind of inner language for years, the nervous system slowly becomes exhausted because the body listens to every word the mind repeats. Most people do not realize this. They think suffering only comes from external problems, but sometimes the deepest suffering comes from the way a person speaks to themselves internally every single day. A human being can survive difficult situations, but constant inner cruelty slowly breaks something inside the heart. This is why so many people feel emotionally tired even when they appear fine from the outside. The war happening inside them never stops. The mind keeps attacking, judging, comparing, criticizing, and over time, the person begins believing they deserve this harshness. They believe self-criticism will somehow make them stronger. But Buddhism teaches something very different. A wounded mind does not heal through punishment. It heals through understanding. This is one of the deepest truths many people struggle to accept, because the world often teaches people to become harder toward themselves, to suppress emotions, to hide pain, to judge weakness, to force themselves forward. no matter how broken they feel internally. But harshness rarely creates inner peace. It usually creates fear. A person may appear disciplined externally, while internally feeling empty, anxious, and emotionally disconnected from themselves, because the voice inside the mind became an inner tyrant, always demanding more, always criticizing, always reminding them of their failures, and eventually they stop feeling safe even inside their own mind. This is why self-compassion is so powerful. Not because it makes you weak, but because it ends the violence happening inside you. Self-compassion means learning to sit beside your pain without attacking yourself for having it. It means understanding that being human includes struggling sometimes. It means realizing that fear, sadness, insecurity, confusion, and emotional wounds do not make you broken. They make you human. Buddhism teaches that much suffering comes from resistance and judgment toward our own inner experience. The moment sadness appears, the mind says, "You should not feel this." The moment anxiety appears, "You need to fix yourself." The moment pain appears, "What is wrong with you?" And instead of healing the suffering, the mind adds shame on top of the suffering. This creates a second layer of pain. The original emotion may have been temporary, but the harsh inner judgment keeps it alive much longer. Think about how many people secretly carry guilt for simply being emotionally tired. How many people feel ashamed for struggling mentally? How many people quietly believe they are failing at life because they cannot control every emotion perfectly? The voice inside their head becomes merciless, and eventually they stop knowing how to rest emotionally. Even moments of peace feel undeserved. But self-compassion changes the entire inner atmosphere of a human being. The moment you stop attacking yourself internally, something inside the body begins softening. Breathing changes. The chest loosens. The nervous system slowly stops preparing for emotional war every moment. For the first time, the mind begins feeling less like a battlefield. This does not mean you stop growing. It does not mean you stop improving yourself. It means growth no longer comes from hatred. It comes from awareness, from patience, from understanding. Because real healing cannot grow in an environment of constant self-violence. Imagine a frightened child being screamed at constantly. Would that child become peaceful, or would they become even more afraid? Most people carry wounded parts inside themselves that have been emotionally screamed at for years by their own inner voice. Parts carrying fear, parts carrying loneliness, parts carrying old emotional wounds. And instead of receiving understanding, those parts receive more punishment from the mind. You should be over this already. You are too sensitive. You are weak. But beneath all the mental noise, there is usually pain asking for gentleness. Pain asking to finally be seen without judgment. This is why compassion is so transformative. Compassion interrupts the cycle of inner violence. It allows awareness to hold suffering gently instead of reacting with more hatred. And strangely, when the mind finally feels safe enough to stop fighting itself constantly, the voice often begins growing quieter naturally. Because many thoughts survive through fear, the inner tyrant becomes powerful because the nervous system has been living in survival mode for so long. But compassion slowly teaches the body that it no longer needs to attack itself every moment to survive. This is where true emotional healing begins. Not when life becomes perfect, not when every problem disappears, but when your relationship with yourself finally becomes softer, kinder, more understanding. You stop expecting yourself to be emotionally perfect all the time. You stop punishing yourself for being human. You stop measuring your worth by your productivity, success, appearance, or ability to hide pain. And slowly, the heavy pressure inside begins lifting. The voice may still speak sometimes. Old fears may still appear. Insecurities may still visit the mind. But now there is compassion beside them, awareness beside them, gentleness beside them. And this changes everything. Because the inner tyrant loses power the moment you stop believing cruelty is necessary for growth. The truth is, people do not heal because they hate themselves enough. They heal because something inside them finally learns how to breathe safely again. And perhaps one of the most beautiful things Buddhism teaches is this: you do not become free by winning a war against yourself. You become free the moment the war inside you finally ends. True freedom begins the moment you realize you are not the voice, you are the one aware of it. There comes a moment in inner awakening when something inside you finally begins to see clearly, not intellectually, not as another idea to memorize, but deeply, quietly, almost like waking up from a dream you did not realize you were trapped inside. You suddenly notice that the voice inside your head has been speaking your entire life, but there has always been something deeper listening beneath it, something silent, something aware, something untouched by all the mental noise. This realization changes everything, because most people spend their entire lives believing they are the voice in their mind. The voice says, "You are a failure," and they believe, "I am a failure." The voice says, "You are broken," and they believe, "I am broken." The voice says, "You will never heal," and they surrender their entire identity to that thought. This is how the mind quietly imprisons human beings, not by forcing thoughts into existence, but by convincing people that every thought is who they are. But Buddhism teaches one of the most life-changing truths a human being can discover. You are not the voice. You are the awareness hearing it. At first, this can feel difficult to understand, because people have spent so many years emotionally merging with every thought that appears in the mind. Fear appears, and immediately they become fear. Sadness appears, and immediately they become sadness. Anger appears, and immediately they lose themselves inside anger. The voice speaks, and awareness disappears into it, unconsciously. But the moment awareness begins observing the mind instead of becoming the mind, something extraordinary starts happening. A distance appears, a quiet space between you and the thought. And inside that space, freedom begins. For the first time you realize a thought is appearing, but it is not my deepest self. This changes your relationship with suffering completely, because now thoughts stop feeling like permanent truths carved into reality. They begin feeling like temporary mental weather passing through awareness. Some thoughts are dark, some are fearful, some are painful, but all of them eventually pass. Just like storms pass through the sky does not become damaged by every storm, and awareness itself is the same. Thoughts move through it continuously, but awareness remains untouched beneath them. This is why Buddhism places so much importance on witnessing the mind, not because thoughts are evil, but because unconscious identification with thought creates suffering. The mind constantly changes. 1 hour it feels hopeful, the next hour it feels afraid. One day it feels strong, the next day it feels empty. If your identity is completely attached to the changing voice of the mind, your inner peace will constantly rise and fall with every passing emotion. But awareness itself is deeper than emotion, deeper than thought, deeper than fear. Awareness quietly remains present through every season of life. It was there during your happiest moments. It was there during your darkest pain. It watched every heartbreak, every fear, every success, every loss. Silent, present, always here beneath the noise. Most people spend years trying to change every thought inside their head before allowing themselves to feel peace. But peace does not begin when the mind becomes perfect. Peace begins the moment you stop treating every thought like absolute truth. This is why awareness is so powerful. Awareness allows thoughts to exist without becoming enslaved by them. Fear can appear without controlling your entire life. Sadness can appear without becoming your identity. Pain can appear without convincing you that you are permanently broken. This does not mean emotions disappear forever. It means awareness is finally becoming stronger than unconscious reaction. And slowly, the voice starts losing its throne. For years, the mind ruled your inner world completely. Every thought controlled your mood. Every fear controlled your choices. Every insecurity shaped your sense of self. But now something deeper begins waking up inside you. You begin observing the voice calmly, not fighting it, not fearing it, not obeying it automatically, just watching, like someone sitting quietly beside waves moving across the ocean. The waves continue moving, but the ocean itself remains vast beneath them. And over time, this awareness changes the entire experience of being alive. You stop feeling trapped inside your own mind. The inner pressure begins softening. The constant urgency begins fading. You no longer need to react to every thought instantly. You no longer need to chase every fear the mind creates. You no longer need to believe every painful story that appears inside your head. And slowly, a deeper stillness begins emerging underneath everything. A stillness that was always there, hidden beneath years of overthinking, fear, mental exhaustion, emotional noise, inner struggle. Many people spend their entire lives searching for peace somewhere outside themselves, in success, in relationships, in control, in achievement, in distraction. But the peace they seek has always been hidden beneath the restless voice in the mind. The problem was never that peace did not exist. The problem was that the mental noise became so loud, people forgot how to hear the silence underneath it. This is why moments of deep presence feel so sacred. For a brief moment, the mind quiets, and awareness reveals itself again, pure, still, open, not needing anything, not fighting anything, just existing peacefully beneath the movement of thought. And perhaps this is the greatest freedom Buddhism points toward, not becoming someone new, not creating a perfect mind, not escaping life, but finally remembering what has always existed beneath the noise. The awareness that was never damaged by fear, the awareness that remained whole even during pain, the awareness that has been silently watching your entire life unfold. And once you begin living from that awareness, instead of from the frightened voice in the mind, life begins changing quietly. You breathe differently, you suffer less, you stop reacting to every passing thought like it is an emergency. You begin feeling more connected to life itself, more present, more alive, more free. The voice may still speak sometimes. Old fears may still visit. Painful thoughts may still appear. But now you know something the mind can never fully control again. You know the voice is not your true self. You know there is something deeper than thought. Something still watching beneath it all. And maybe that is the real beginning of inner peace. The moment you finally stop asking the mind to tell you who you are, and begin resting in the silent awareness that was already whole from the very beginning. And maybe, after hearing all of this tonight, you will begin noticing the voice differently, not as an enemy, not as your master, but simply as noise that became too familiar for too many years. For most of your life, the mind kept convincing you that every fearful thought was truth, every insecurity was your identity, every painful memory was proof that something inside you was broken. But Buddhism reminds us of something deeply freeing. Thoughts are not the self. They are passing movements inside awareness. And the moment you stop obeying every thought automatically, something inside you begins breathing again. Slowly, the pressure softens, the noise weakens, the constant inner struggle starts losing its grip. You stop chasing control so desperately. You stop fighting yourself endlessly. You stop believing every storm inside your mind will last forever. And for the first time in a very long time, you begin experiencing small moments of silence. Real silence, not empty silence, peaceful silence. The kind of silence where the heart no longer feels trapped inside fear. The kind of silence where you finally feel present inside your own life again. Maybe the voice will still return sometimes. Maybe fear will still visit. Maybe old wounds will still try to speak through the mind. But now, you will see them differently. You will remember that the voice is not who you are. You are the awareness hearing it, the silent presence beneath it, the calmness behind the chaos, the stillness the mind could never destroy. And perhaps that is the real beginning of freedom. Not controlling every thought, but no longer becoming imprisoned by them. So tonight, before you sleep, sit quietly for a few moments. No distractions. No noise, no need to fix yourself. Just breathe and notice something beautiful. Even underneath all the mental noise, There is still a part of you that remains untouched, still, silent, alive, and maybe that is who you truly were all along.